My name is Brian and welcome back to Desert Theory. Well, it's been a couple weeks since we posted, and the reason why is I've been out of town. I got called to go work on the storm for PG&E in California, so I ran down there. All the wind, the rain, the flooding, the power outages is what I was actually helping with. So we were putting wire back up, sticking poles in the ground, and trying to get people back in power. And that cost me a little bit of time out of the shop this last couple weeks. Now, Kelly has been busy. He got these done while I was down there. He didn't take any video of it, but we have all new components, all new seals, everything in there. And we're gonna show you exactly how we did that when we rebuilt our rear bypass shock. So you really didn't miss out on anything because we're gonna show you on the rear shocks. So right now Kelly's working on the front coil shocks. The coil shocks are the ones with the spring that actually keep the rear of the arm, trailing arm down, or a arm down, and keep the car at its ride height. So the bypass shock is the one that has all the adjustments and valving for how fast you want it to come up and down. But the coil shock has a few of those, but just one setting. So they're completely different on what they're doing, but they're both very important. You can't have really one without the other in a modern race car. So I said in a modern race car, and that's not necessarily true. In our car, it makes sense. But there are some cars, 1600 a class, that uses a torsion bar, so like a piece of metal that twists. So that's gonna suspend the car, where the bypass shock would just be for your valving up and down. But they wouldn't have a coilover shock. So different styles of car, different classes, and in our cases, we had some older school cars that had the torsion bars. So there's nothing the matter with torsion bar setups. It's just something we haven't had on our last car or this one. So we got away from it, and the pre-runner actually still does have it. So we have a car with torsion bars in it. So when we'll get past that, we'll watch Kelly kind of putting this shock together. So right now he's working on the Reservoir.
So I put the C-clip in the Reservoir here, and we are preparing this thing for reassembly. So we need to make sure we can put oil in it. So Reservoir holds the nitrogen, shock oil goes into shock body, the valving moves oil up and down. The Reservoir holds mostly nitrogen, a little bit of oil in it, but it's basically keeping the oil from cavitating or getting bubbles in it. So the pressure from the nitrogen keeps the oil in tension in the shock. So it works right. So anyway, what separates that oil and nitrogen is this dividing piston. So there's an O-ring, and then there's this white Teflon that just helps it slide. So as the oil moves in the shock, this can slide. So this O-ring is going to separate. This O-ring was not good. It was bad when we took it apart because there was oil mixed with the nitrogen in this. All right, so the dividing piston's in now. So now we can start filling the shock with oil, and then putting in the shaft with all the valving and reassembling the shock.
So what Kelly's doing right now is he's gonna fill within an inch of this snap ring line. So, and then at that point, we're gonna put the shaft in and burp it down in there.
Yep, try to get as many air bubbles as we can out of it. Actually, we want to get all the air bubbles out of it. Well, that's plenty. So right now it's filling up the bypass tube hose, and any air that's down in there, bypass tube, the Reservoir hose. So any air is kind of bubbling up right now. So we're just letting it settle.
So see how you can actually see it bubbling right there? That's just burping air out of the line like Kelly was saying. So that air or the oil's moving down, traveling towards the Reservoir, and the air's traveling up. So Kelly's just trying to move that hose around, work some air bubbles out of that line is all he's trying to do right there.
Yeah, and so we'll show you on the bypass tubes, bypass shocks, they're a little different. You actually have to take the shock out and move it up and down with your hand over this multiple times, and you could feel the air, because there's those bypass tubes, there's nowhere for the oil or the air to escape to unless you flip it upside down. So this isn't nearly as tedious, but looks like we're getting all of it out. But it is a good idea to kind of move the hose around, try to get all the little air bubbles out of there. They do say that even if you don't get them all, eventually they'll work their way past that little O-ring in the dividing piston, and then the air will get in with the nitrogen, which is fine. So, all right, I think we're good, Brian. So we're gonna put some more shock oil on this bearing surface here. It's working out any little bubbles that are in there, any air. So the piston assembly is completely under the oil now, and there's not very many bubbles coming out of it. But you just kind of have to work it. It's opening and closing those shim stacks a little bit, and there's another bubble. So just working it. That looks pretty good. Just did what you did, Brian. I didn't pull down on this cap. Brian did the same thing like 5 minutes ago, and it pulled the seal out of this housing. You think that'll go in? Oh, I don't think it's gonna come in. So we gotta take it apart again.
So I did the exact same thing, and so Kelly was giving me a hard time, so it was kind of...
It's payback, you know?
So it really is kind of payback and perfect. So what I did is I put this on, and then I pulled it back, and this seal right here came off. And he made fun of me.
I was actually a little bit shocked. I was kind of shocked because the other shock, that did not come out that easy.
So now we just have to take the shim pack off. And just do it again. It's not going to take very long. It's not a big deal.
I'm going to have to stand here and hold this shock up because there's only one vise.
Sometimes when you do stuff by yourself, you do it right because you do it twice. And it's how we can afford to go racing, so it's really not a big deal.
It's exactly right. And you actually, when you do this stuff, you learn so much about how all this stuff works too. And I was going to say, there's that story about Sam Berry fixing his shock when we had that red flag during the race in the field at an out check. That guy knows how to take his shocks apart. He didn't took the shock entirely apart in the middle of the race during a red flag. There was some injured racers, and totally rebuilt the shock. I fixed whatever was broken inside of it and finished the race. That guy does his own shocks. Perfect. All right, let's put a little more oil in it. Nice catch, Brian. Oh, Lordy, we're having a good time tonight.
I don't think we got any on the lens itself, do we? Oh, stayed low. All right.
All right. Back at it.
Tight, snug.
And you got enough oil on
down
that?
there. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Can work those bubbles out. Okay, hold on. So what we need to make sure is that oil comes out. So what you're gonna do is, because you're forcing any air bubbles out right now with that O-ring seal. That should be. Yep, you are perfect. Perfect. Okay, go down a little more with this. There you go. So now we're pushing in only oil, right? And it's moving that dividing piston. So don't pull up on it anymore here. Okay. Okay. So we've got to go down a little more. So why don't you, I don't care if the shaft goes in now, it's fine. We're just gonna push on that. There we go. Okay. Got it.
Okay, so what we do on this is we push this down just a little bit farther, the blue piece, and then the snap ring goes in that Kelly's doing right there.
I'm just checking it all the way around. Yep, and it's in the groove all the way around, okay.
And that little pressure worked pretty good.
I just touched it too. Perfect. Okay, Brian. Watch yourself. There you go.
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of show you, just because we did it and it was funny. This is the coilover shock. So there's no spring on it, obviously, but this is the coilover shock. And you can see the valving's going to work one way. It's a little bit hard for me to push down, and then it just springs back up. So the valving's only working on the down.
Sorry, I just totally walked in front of you. Hey, guys.
This guy, you think you'd be getting used to it by now. Okay, so now we have the bypass shock, which that thing looks cool.
Oh gosh.
Okay, so now we're gonna push down on this, and it's gonna be a lot more
controlled. You see that stage?
Yeah, you can really feel the different stages now, where before you could only feel the last stage. So see how that rebound, it really brings it back up, and then right towards the end it kind of slows it down. That's it for tonight. We're out of here. We'll be back tomorrow. Just working on this car just doesn't get old. I know that some people watch this and they're like, for time raced, your work
Input
is way off, but it makes it real easy when you love working on it. So we're just so happy we get to be out here getting to do this. Thanks a lot. Like and subscribe.